So the Omega versus Rolex debate is a common one in the luxury watch world. So in this video, I'll break down the relative merits of Omega versus Rolex as objectively as I can. Mind you guys, I'm going over these topics because these are usually questions that I ask of people. Hey, what's important to you? That's why I'm kind of hitting all these bullet points. A little bit of history of the rivalry, right? So Louis Brand, who founded his watch brand in 1848 in Le Chaux de France, the company officially adopted the Omega name in 1903, capitalizing on the success of his revolutionary Omega caliber movement developed in 1894, while Wilsdorf and Davis was founded in 1905. Even if I take away 1848 to 1903, Omega was still first, right? Now, they would remain in Omega's shadow actually for decades, believe it or not. The Oyster really put Rolex on the map in the late 20s, but Omega continued to sell more chronometers than Rolex until 1970s. Again, we're going back to the fact that these were tools. People wanted chronometers, and Omega made a name for themselves, and Rolex just wasn't catching up. Rolex even once registered the trademark Omega, but never actually used it. So the Omega versus Rolex battle was leading Omega's way until the so-called quartz crisis, which hit in 1969 when Seiko came out with, obviously, the first quartz watch. Luxury watch brands, they kind of scrambled to stay relevant and competitive, but for the most part, Rolex stayed the course and actually went slightly upscale. That really worked for them as a result, and Rolex finally exceeded pre-crisis chronometer output by 1980. Meanwhile, Omega seemed to take some cost-cutting measures like using stamped parts in their unloved Caliber 1000 movements in the 1970s. And Rolex outsells Omega almost 3-1 today. Starting with the #1 category in my mind, and that is movement. Both brands make very reliable movements with long service intervals guaranteed to run within tight specs. Omega Master chronometers allow deviations between 0 and 5 seconds per day. Rolex is -2 to +2 seconds a day. Watches with Omega Spirate system have an even tighter tolerance, 0 to 2 seconds. Finishing between the two brands is extremely comparable. So as far as I'm concerned, in the movement category, the winning brand is a tie. Value retention, very important topic for most. You can argue that, hey, there are certain Omegas that will retain their value. They trade over list, still even in the down market. But if you take the brand overall, definitely goes to Rolex as the winner in that category. Magnetic resistance. Modern Rolexes are highly resistant to magnetism, but Omega still dominates here. Every master chronometer can resist at least 15,000 gauge. So the winner in that category goes to Omega. Affordability. You pay a premium for the Rolex name. There's just no way around it. There's still a ton of Rolexes that are trading over list, even since the correction. And dollar for dollar, it's hard not to say that Omega wins in the value game. 4,000 can easily buy you a cool pre-owned Omega Speedmaster, but that barely gets you an old beat-up Rolex Datejust. So in terms of affordability, it's going to be Omega. Let's talk about the bracelet. Rolex's Easy Link and Glide Light class are widely loved by collectors. Plus, their Oyster and Jubilee bracelets are the most recognizable bracelets designs on the market. You can literally tell somebody wearing a Rolex from a mile away just by looking at the bracelet. I do like Omega bracelets, and you know, some of them are pretty recognizable, especially that Speedmaster bracelet. But as far as being a winner in the category, I'm gonna judge it by the fact of what's more recognizable, and that's certainly gonna be the Rolex bracelet. Thinness. As a rule of thumb, Rolex watches are often about 1.5 millimeter thinner than comparable Omegas. Now, I don't know if that's a winner or a loser. It depends on what your preference is, but if your preference is for a thinner watch, Rolex is gonna be a bit thinner than your average Omega. So a winner is Rolex once again. Serviceability is another one, right? Ask any watchmaker what their favorite brand of movement to work on, and you'll probably hear Rolex. Kind of common sense that this is a winner in this category too. Consider the amount of watches that Rolex produces. So if Rolex is producing slightly over 1 million watches a year, down the line, those watches will need to be serviced, and not all of them go back to Rolex. They usually go to a slew of thousands upon thousands of watchmakers worldwide. The more of something there is out there, the more it was serviced, the easier it becomes seemingly, because people are so used to servicing more Rolex than any other brand out there, right? So Rolex is definitely a winner here as well. Availability. Well, we all know about the infamous Rolex waitlist. I actually did a video on that, if you guys want to check it out, on how to beat a Rolex waitlist. Especially if you want a Rolex Sports Steel model, right? But almost anything except the Snoopy Speedmaster should be readily available at an Omega retailer. Omega certainly wins in the availability column. Highest complications. Rolex does deserve some respect for revolutioning the annual calendar complication with the Sky Dweller, but Omega's chrono chime watches, the world's first chronograph repeaters, are completely bananas. Omega also makes tourbillon watches, which Rolex has never done. And guess what? Rolex has never been about complications. It is looked upon as a luxury watch, but back in the day, Rolex was just a tool watch. So in that department, certainly the winner is going to be Omega. Bezel Field. When you spin the bezel of an Omega dive watch, it doesn't feel cheap, but it doesn't feel as nice as Rolex. Spinning the bezel on a Rolex just gives you a better feeling, I feel like. So Bezel Field, certainly Rolex. Let's talk about the marketing. Very, very important. Rolex, without a doubt, won the brand recognition award. Guess what? It was the superstar ambassadors and sponsorships. More people recognize a Rolex than an Omega watch. It is true. It is the most recognizable brand. I've always said if Rolex is number one up here, brand number two is somewhere down here in the basement, right? Omega made it to the moon, give them that much. Omega's got Olympics, give them that much. But Rolex is much more relevant these days. Again, Rolex is plastered everywhere. But other than that, I think they're losing in that department. I've always say the winner's in the eye of the beholder. Yes, it would be easy to say Rolex is the winner due to value retention, the demand for their products and exclusivity, but that would classify Omega as the loser, and that's really not a fair statement. The question you need to ask yourself is, what do you value? Ultimately, with either brand, you can't make the wrong decision.